The morning my daughter called to invite me to her retirement party, I was in the middle of repainting the back porch railing. I remember that specifically because I had paint on my hands when I answered, and I had to hold the phone with 2 fingers like some kind of surgeon who'd already scrubbed in. She laughed when I told her. That laugh. I hadn't heard it in a while. "Dad, we want to do something special," she said. "Brendan and I are throwing a little dinner. Just family. At the house." I told her I'd be there. I should have paid more attention to the pause before she said, "Just family." My name doesn't matter much to this story. What matters is that I'm 67 years old. I live alone in a bungalow in Kitchener, Ontario, and for the last 4 years I have been getting used to quiet. My wife, Elaine, passed in the spring of 2021. Pancreatic cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to the end. The kind of thing that doesn't leave you time to prepare, only time to sit beside a hospital bed and hold someone's hand while the world outside keeps moving like it doesn't know what it's losing. After she was gone, I kept the house. I kept her garden too badly. The hostas survived because hostas survive everything. The roses did not. My daughter. I'll call her my daughter, because that's what she is to me, the most important thing she is, had moved to Mississauga with her husband Brendan about 6 years before Elaine passed. They bought a new build, 4 bedrooms, a double garage, a backyard with a stone patio they showed me on their phones before the concrete was even dry. Brendan worked in finance, something with investments, something I never fully understood, no matter how many times he explained it at Christmas dinners. And I stopped asking after a while, because the explaining always felt like it was about something other than explaining. My daughter worked as a project manager for a pharmaceutical company. She was good at her job, organized, sharp, the kind of person who sent you a calendar invite for a phone call. I admired that about her even when it made me feel like an appointment. We weren't estranged. I want to be clear about that. We talked on the phone maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks. She came to Kitchener at Christmas, stayed 2 nights, left on the 27th. Brendan was always pleasant, firm handshake, asked about the Leafs, commented on property values in my neighborhood in a way that felt less like small talk and more like assessment. I told myself this was just what happened. Kids grow up, build their own lives, the center of gravity shifts. Elaine used to say it differently. She'd say, "She's happy, that's what we wanted for her." And she was right. I just miss my daughter in the way you miss someone who is still alive and living 40 minutes away on the 401. The dinner was on a Saturday in late October. I drove myself, which I mention only because Brendan had offered to send someone to pick me up, and I'd said no thank you. I liked driving. Driving was one of the things I still had that felt like mine. The house looked the way it always looked. Big and new and a little impersonal, the way houses look when they've been decorated to impress rather than to live in. There was a wreath on the door. Autumn colors, tasteful. My daughter answered before I even knocked. She hugged me, and for a moment she held on a second longer than usual, and I thought I noticed it, filed it somewhere, that she seemed tired around the eyes. "Dad, I'm so glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Inside, Brendan was at the kitchen island with a bottle of scotch already open. He poured me a glass without asking whether I wanted one, which he always did, and I always accepted, which I suppose made it a tradition of sorts. He was wearing a shirt I'd never seen, that kind of deliberate casualness. Untucked, expensive, meant to look effortless. He shook my hand, clapped me on the shoulder. "Looking good, Walter," he said. I wasn't sure I was, but I thanked him. There were flowers on the dining table. Proper ones, in a vase, not the grocery store variety. My daughter had cooked roast chicken, roasted potatoes, green beans with almonds. Elaine's kind of dinner, though I didn't say so. The kind of meal you make when you want someone to feel at home. We ate. We talked. Brendan asked about the bungalow, about whether I'd thought about downsizing, about a condo development going up near Victoria Park that he said was a smart move for someone in my position. I said I was comfortable where I was. He nodded the way people nod when they've already decided you're wrong. My daughter talked about her work, a project wrapping up, a team she was proud of. She talked with her hands the way she did as a little girl. I watched her and felt that particular ache that comes from loving someone and not quite being able to reach them across the distance that life builds between people without anyone choosing it. Dessert was an apple crumble. She'd made it from scratch. I had 2 servings. I was thinking about the drive home, about whether I should leave before 8 to miss the worst of the highway traffic, when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I don't usually check my phone at dinner. Elaine raised us both better than that in her way. But something made me glance at it, maybe because Brendan had stepped away from the table to take a call of his own, and my daughter had gone to the kitchen to put the kettle on, and I was alone for a moment with the crumble plate and the candles and the quiet. The text was from a number I didn't recognize, a 905 area code. Mississauga. It said, "Please go to the bathroom and call me. Do not tell them you received this. It is important. Please." I sat with it for a moment, looked up. The kitchen sounds, my daughter running water, the clatter of mugs continued. From somewhere else in the house I could hear Brendan's voice, low and even, the voice he used for business. I put my phone back in my pocket, folded my napkin, and said I was going to use the washroom. The powder room was off the front hall, small and white with one of those electric candles on the shelf that flickers but doesn't burn. I locked the door, sat on the edge of the closed toilet lid, and called the number back. It rang twice. "Hello," a woman's voice. Careful. Quiet. "This is Walter," I said. "You texted me." A pause. Then, "Mr. Walter, I'm so sorry to contact you this way. My name is Abby. I work for your son-in-law. In his office. I'm a paralegal." I didn't say anything. I waited. "I've been working for Brendan for almost 2 years," she said. "I process documents, agreements, transfers, estate filings." Another pause. "Mr. Walter, I need you to listen to me carefully. Tonight, I believe tonight they're going to ask you to sign something. Papers related to your property, your house in Kitchener." "What kind of papers?" "A power of attorney. Financial and property. Comprehensive. It would give Brendan full control over all decisions related to your assets, your home, your accounts, everything. Effective immediately." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the effort behind it. "He's been preparing this for several months. It's structured so that once signed, it can be used without your ongoing consent in most circumstances." The electric candle flickered on the shelf. I watched it. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Because I have a father," she said. "And because I've been watching this come together and I couldn't just." She stopped. Collected herself. "I found your number through the property records on file. I'm sorry for the intrusion. You can hang up if you'd like, but I needed you to know." I asked her a few questions. Careful ones. She answered each of them. The documents were real. She'd processed them herself, formatted them, filed the initial drafts. The notary Brendan had arranged was someone who'd worked with his firm before. The plan, as far as she understood it, was to present them after dinner as something routine, something to do with estate planning, something to my benefit. "There's also," she said, and paused, "there's also a file about care facilities, memory care, in Barrie. I don't know what it means exactly, but it was in the same folder." I thanked her. I told her I understood. I asked her to please keep this call to herself for now, and she said she would. I sat in the powder room for another minute after I hung up. The electric candle flickered. I looked at my hands on my knees. 67 years old. Retired from 28 years with the regional municipality. A man who repainted his own porch railings badly on a Tuesday morning in October. A man whose wife had died and left a hole in the house that nothing quite filled. I thought about my daughter's face at dinner, the tiredness around her eyes. I thought, did she know? Then I thought, of course she knew. Then I thought, maybe not everything. Maybe she only knew some of it. Maybe she'd told herself it was reasonable, that it was for my own good. People tell themselves things. I washed my hands, dried them on the white hand towel, hung it back straight, and went back to the table. The tea was ready. My daughter poured it. Earl Grey, the way I've taken it since I was 40, she remembered that. She always remembered things like that. Brendan came back from wherever he'd been, settled into his chair, picked up his scotch. We talked about nothing for a while. The weather turning, the price of heating oil, a series on Netflix that Brendan said was worth watching. I listened and nodded and drank my tea and thought, how long have you been planning this? It was about 20 minutes after I came back from the washroom that Brendan said, Walter, while we have you here, there's actually something we wanted to go over with you. My daughter looked at her mug. Brendan reached past the centerpiece and produced a manila envelope from somewhere. The sideboard, I think. Somewhere behind him, somewhere prepared. He set it on the table between us. We've been thinking a lot about your situation, he said, with the house and, living alone, all of that. And we wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened, everything would be in order. For you. This is really about protecting you. Protecting me. That phrase, I've turned it over 100 times since. It's a power of attorney document, he said. Standard stuff, your lawyer would tell you the same thing. Just make sure that if there's ever a health event, a fall, anything like that, we can act quickly. That there's no delay in getting you what you need. He was good at it. Calm, practical, the right amount of concern without sentimentality. The voice of a man who did this for a living in one form or another. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at the table. Can I see it? I asked. Brendan slid the envelope toward me. I opened it, unfolded the papers. 12 pages. My name, printed at the top of the first page. The property address in Kitchener. A list of powers so broad I had to read the clause twice to believe it. Full authority over real property, financial accounts, medical decisions, investment holdings. This is quite comprehensive, I said. That's the point, Brendan said. You don't want something that leaves gaps. And you'd be the appointed attorney, not my daughter? A small pause. We both be listed, he said. But given that I handle the financial side of things professionally, but your name is primary. Another pause. Shorter. That's just a practical matter. I set the papers down. I folded my hands on top of them. I'd like to have my own lawyer look at this before I sign anything, I said. The room changed. Not dramatically. Brendan's expression didn't break, my daughter didn't flinch, but something shifted in the air, the way it does before weather turns. Of course, Brendan said. Absolutely. Take all the time you need. But his jaw had moved, just slightly. My daughter finally looked up. Her eyes were wet. Not crying, not quite, but close. And the expression on her face, I've thought about it 100 times since, was not the expression of someone watching a plan succeed. It was the expression of someone watching something happen that they can no longer stop. I left an hour later. I hugged my daughter at the door, and I felt her hold on again that little bit longer. She said, "Drive safe, Dad," and her voice was tight. I said, "Always do, sweetheart." On the 401 heading back toward Kitchener, somewhere around Milton, I pulled off at a service center. Not because I needed gas, because I needed to sit for a minute. The parking lot was lit with those orange highway lights, and a family with 3 kids was coming out of the Tim Hortons, the youngest one asleep over her father's shoulder. I sat in my car and called my lawyer. Left a message. It was a Saturday night, he wouldn't get it until Monday. Then I called my younger brother in Hamilton, the one I've talked to about everything serious since we were kids. He picked up on the second ring. the way he always does, and I told him what happened. It was quiet for a long moment when I finished. "You still have the papers?" he said. "No. I left them on the table, didn't sign them." "Good. Don't sign anything. Come here tomorrow, I'll call David." David was his neighbor, a retired Crown attorney. "All right," I said. "And Walt." He stopped. "You okay?" I looked at the family through the service center window. The father had shifted his sleeping daughter to the other shoulder. He was laughing at something his wife said. "Not really," I said. "But I will be." My lawyer called back Monday morning before 9. I'd already emailed him a summary of what had happened, including Abby's name and what she'd told me, and a description of the documents. He called it predatory POA fraud, which is apparently a real and recognized thing in Ontario. Not rare, not unusual, and specifically targeted, more often than we'd like to think, at recently widowed elderly homeowners. That phrase, elderly, landed somewhere uncomfortable in my chest. But I let it sit. He contacted the Law Society. He also put me in touch with someone at the local police service, a financial crimes unit. I gave a full statement. Abby, when contacted, confirmed everything she'd told me and provided the documents she'd kept copies of. Drafts, emails, a correspondence chain between Brendan and the notary that laid out the plan in more detail than I'd known. What emerged was worse than I'd understood in the powder room that night. Brendan had been dealing with significant losses in his investment portfolio for almost 18 months. The kind of losses that can happen quietly in certain markets, that don't show up in a lifestyle until suddenly they do. He borrowed against assets he'd already overextended. He needed liquidity. My house, paid off, valued at just under $800,000 in the current market, was the cleanest, most accessible thing available to him. The memory care facility brochure in the folder, Abby explained to the investigators, was what Brendan had described internally as the next step if the POA wasn't sufficient. A paper trail suggesting cognitive decline would make it easier to act without my contest. There was no evidence of cognitive decline. I'm 67. I repaint my own railings. I drink Earl Grey and I follow the senators and I read 3 books a month, and I beat my brother at cribbage reliably enough that he stopped pretending it's luck. Brendan was charged with several offenses including fraud over $5,000 and attempted theft by conversion. The notary lost his license. The investigation into Brendan's broader financial practices opened separately. My daughter cooperated fully with investigators. She told them she had known about the POA plan, had believed at first that it was, as Brendan described it, just sensible estate planning. That she'd had doubts. That she'd told herself not to have them. That by the time she understood what it really was, she felt, her word, I was told, trapped. I believe her. I've had to decide to believe her, and I have. It's not simple. Nothing about this is simple. She and I have spoken, twice now, without Brendan present. The first conversation was hard, in a way I don't have words for. The kind of conversation where you can see someone clearly and be furious at them, and grieve for them at the same time. The second one was quieter. She cried. I let her. I haven't told her she's forgiven because I don't think I'm there yet. But I told her I loved her. Because that part hasn't changed and I don't believe it will. Abby no longer works for Brendan, obviously. She found a position with a legal aid clinic in Brampton. I know this because I sent her a letter, actual paper, in an envelope with a stamp, and she wrote back. Her handwriting is small and neat. She said she was glad I had driven myself home that night. I thought about that for a long time. I'm still in the house in Kitchener. The hostas came back this spring. The way they always do. I hired someone to look at the roses, a woman who runs a small landscaping operation out of a pickup truck with a dog in the back. And she told me they weren't unsavable, just neglected, and that with the right pruning and some patience they'd come back. I liked hearing that. I liked it for the roses, and I liked it for other reasons too. The portrailing, for the record, I finished painting. Took me 3 sessions and 1 whole Saturday afternoon, and it's not perfect, but it's mine, and it'll hold through another winter. That's enough. I keep coming back to the moment I was sitting in that powder room. The door locked, the electric candle flickering on the shelf, my phone in my hand. 67 years old, and I was hiding in my daughter's washroom, trying to figure out whether the world I thought I understood was the one I'd actually been living in. What strikes me now, months later, with some distance on it, is how close I came to just going back to the table and signing. Not because I was foolish, because I wanted to believe. Wanting to believe that your own family means you well is not a weakness. It's one of the most human things there is. But I've learned the hard way that goodwill without clear eyes is just vulnerability with a warmer name. Abby didn't have to call me. She owed me nothing. She was a paralegal at a firm, processing documents, doing her job. She could have filed the papers and gone home and told herself it wasn't her business. Most people, I think, find a way to make things not their business when the cost of caring is high enough. But she found my number through a property record, sat with the weight of what she knew, and decided that a stranger's safety mattered more than her own comfort. That's not a small thing. That's the kind of moral clarity that most of us spend a lifetime trying to develop and still don't always manage when the moment comes. I think about what it takes to do what she did. It wasn't just courage, though, it was that too. It was the kind of clear thinking that comes from knowing the difference between what is legal and what is right, and understanding that those two things are not always the same. She looked at the documents she'd helped prepare, understood exactly what they meant for a 67-year-old widower living alone in Kitchener, and she chose the harder thing. That kind of judgment, the willingness to actually look at what's in front of you and name it honestly, is rarer than we'd like to think. And then there's the question of what I did with what she gave me. I went back to that table. I drank my tea. I listened to Brendan explain how the papers were really for my benefit, for my protection. And I said, very calmly, that I'd like my lawyer to look at them first. That was the whole thing, one sentence. But getting to that sentence required every bit of steadiness I had, because part of me, the part that still wanted a father-daughter dinner to just be a father-daughter dinner, wanted to crumble. It didn't. And I think that matters. Not because I was strong in some heroic way, but because I decided, somewhere in that small white room, that I owed it to myself to hold on, to not sign away the last thing that was fully mine just to keep the peace at a table I'd driven 40 minutes to sit at. The roses came back this spring. Not all of them. Some were too far gone. But enough. The woman with the pickup truck said that's usually how it goes. You lose some, you save some, and the ones that make it through tend to be stronger for having been through a hard season. I think that's true of more than roses.